He was called the Milwaukee Monster, the Milwaukee cannibal. His cynicism and cruelty amazed ordinary people who learned the details after the court hearings.
Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, born May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA, was one of the most brutal killers between 1978 and 1991. November 28, 1994, Wisconsin State Penitentiary, Portage, Wisconsin, USA. Was an American serial killer, cannibal, necrophiliac, and rapist, whose victims were 17 men and boys. At the age of 4, Jeffrey underwent surgery to correct a bilateral inguinal hernia. After the operation, he became more withdrawn and sensitive. Later, Lionel Dahmer reported to a corrections officer that at the age of 8, Jeffrey had experienced sexual abuse by a neighbor, although Jeffrey himself denied this. All but one of the crimes were committed in Milwaukee from 1987 to 1991. He copulated with the corpses of victims and ate the body parts of some. The court found Dahmer sane and sentenced him to 15 life terms. In 1994, Dahmer was murdered in prison by another inmate, Christopher Scarver. Since childhood, Dahmer has developed a craving for dead animals. He collected corpses or body parts and kept them at home in bottles of formaldehyde, which he took from his father, and set up an animal cemetery in the backyard. Dahmer committed his first murder at the age of 18 on June 18, 1978. A few weeks after graduating from school, when Jeffrey was left to himself and was the absolute owner of the house. Meeting 18-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks on the street, he invited him to his place. The two of them drank beer, smoked marijuana, and, according to some sources, engaged in anal and oral exercises. When Hicks wanted to leave a few hours later, Dahmer stunned him with a dumbbell blow to the head and strangled him, then dismembered the corpse, put the pieces in garbage bags, and drove into the woods, where he scattered the bags at a great distance from each other. He wrapped the head of the murdered man in several layers of packaging film and kept it in the refrigerator. Dahmer lived in Miami for a short time, then returned to Ohio. There he found Hicks's decomposed body, smashed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered the pieces over the forest ravine behind his house. On November 20th, 1987, Dahmer killed his second victim, 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi, in a hotel room at the Ambassador Hotel. Subsequently, he did not remember exactly how the murder took place. He met Tuomi at a gay bar where they both drank heavily, and then went to a hotel and rented a room. In the morning, Dahmer found the dead Tuomi in bed next to him, and placing the corpse in a suitcase, he took it by taxi to his grandmother's house, where he sexually manipulated it, after which he took it to the basement. A week later, he dismembered the corpse and threw the remains in the trash. None of Tuomi's body fragments have ever been found. Dahmer has developed tactics for finding victims. He met them in bars, often it was the Milwaukee Club 219, and offered to pose nude. When victims came to his home, Dahmer offered them drugs, had sex, and then strangled them. Over time, he developed necrosadistic and necrophilous tendencies. He had sex with mutilated corpses and made fetishes from their parts. As a rule, its victims were representatives of sexual minorities. Dahmer wanted his lovers to be obedient to him like zombies. To this end, he experimented on some of them. While they were still alive, he performed a primitive lobotomy, drilling holes in the skull with an electric drill and acid. In the first months of 1988, Dahmer killed 2 more people in his grandmother's house. On September 25, 1988, he moved to Milwaukee, to an apartment on North 24th Street. The next day, he met a 13-year-old Laotian boy named Anukan, according to some sources, Kason. Sintha Samphon brought him to his place, took photographs, then began to caress, and then gave him alcohol with a dose of sleeping pills. Despite the large dose, Sintha Samphon was able to escape and tell his parents about what had happened. In the morning, Dahmer was charged with sexual harassment. While awaiting trial, he was released on bail. In March 1989, while still under investigation, Dahmer killed a dark-skinned 24-year-old aspiring male fashion model Anthony Sears, leaving a head and male genitalia as a souvenir. On May 27, 1991, 14-year-old Laotian Konerik Sintha Samphon, brother of Anukan Sintha Samphon, whom Dahmer had brought home the day before, was able to get out of the apartment. A naked and bloodied young man under the influence of drugs was found by 2 young women, who called the police. When the police arrived at the scene, Dahmer convinced them that there had been an altercation between the 2 lovers and that police intervention was not required. The police escorted Dahmer and Sintha Samphon back to the apartment and drove away. unpleasant smell, emanating, as it later turned out, from the decomposing body of Tony Hughes, who was killed on May 24th, but did not pay attention to it. On the same day, Cynthia Somphon was killed and dismembered. Dahmer committed his last murders at a frequency of about once a week. June 30th, July 5th, 15th, and 19th. His final 17th victim was 25-year-old Joseph Breithoft. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer invited Tracy Edwards to his place. When Dahmer tried to handcuff him, Edwards broke free and ran outside with the handcuffs hanging from his left arm. He attracted the attention of two policemen who decided to go up to Dahmer. In the apartment, the police found photographs of dismembered corpses and fragments of human bodies. In the toilet, Dahmer kept a pot with hands and a penis, two skulls, containers with alcohol, chloroform and formalin, jars with male genitals. Skulls and hands were found in the cupboard, in the bedside table, and boxes. A human skeleton, scalp, and genitals were found in the closet. In a 216-liter barrel, 57 U.S. gallons of acid, Dahmer held 3 human torsos. The defense argued that Dahmer had indeed committed all the murders he was accused of, but that he was mentally ill and therefore could not be held responsible for them. During the trial, Boyle gave detailed descriptions of the murders and sexual perversions, trying to convince the jury that they could not have been committed by a sane person. Psychiatrists testifying on both the prosecution and defense sides agreed that Dahmer suffered from necrophilia, but they disagreed on whether necrophilia could be a basis for exemption from criminal liability. Prosecutor McCann proved during the trial that Dahmer was aware that his actions were illegal, could control his actions both in everyday life and when committing the murders, and that the murders themselves were premeditated. On February 15, 1992, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jeffrey Dahmer sane and guilty on all 15 counts and sentenced him to 15 life sentences, which Techna The trial of Dahmer became the most expensive case in Milwaukee's history and attracted widespread media attention. Significant attention was paid to social aspects. For instance, the incident with Konarak Synthesome was seen by many as a manifestation of racist and homophobic attitudes within the police. The officers chose to believe the white Dahmer over 2 black women and a Laotian man in a suspicious situation, and did not intervene as it seemed to them, in a dispute between two homosexual men. Furthermore, most of Dahmer's victims were people of color. 10 of them were black, and either homosexual or bisexual, and the police had long made little effort to investigate their cases. The trial also served as an example of refuting the defense's argument of the serial killer being legally insane. It was shown that the brutality or savagery of the crimes alone was not enough for an insanity verdict in cases of serial murders or sexual offenses. Some commentators said that Dahmer's trial marked the end of. In February 1993, Dahmer gave an interview to the Baltimore Sun in which he tried to explain the true motives for the murders. In an interview, he stated that throughout the 1980s, he experienced obsessive thoughts about committing murders, and also stated that if released, he would commit similar crimes again. In May 1994, Dahmer underwent treatment because he was plagued by suicidal thoughts. On July 3, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was attacked by a Cuban inmate during a prison church service. He tried to cut his throat with a razor blade attached to the handle of a toothbrush. Dahmer received only superficial wounds. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by inmate Christopher Scarver, who was serving time for robbery and murder. Dahmer, Scarver, and another prisoner, Jess Anderson, were cleaning the shower room. The prisoners were left unattended for 20 minutes, during which time Scarver inflicted fatal injuries on Dahmer and Anderson. Dahmer, who had a fractured skull, died on the way to the hospital. Anderson died 2 days later in the hospital. The murder weapon, according to various sources, was a metal bar or the handle of a mop. There is also a version about a dumbbell taken from the gym. It was also believed that Scarver beat Dahmer's head against the wall. When Scarver returned to his cell and the guard asked him why he wasn't working, Scarver replied, "The Lord told me to do it. You'll hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. Jess Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead." Previously, Scarver tried to feign insanity and said he heard the voice of God, whites. Most of Dahmer's victims were African American, and Anderson tried to shift responsibility for the murder of his wife, for which he was serving time, onto 2 black men. It wasn't until 2015 that Christopher Scarver gave an interview to the New York Post, in which he detailed how events unfolded in the early morning hours of November 28, 1994. Scarver stated that as the true motive for the murder, He had a personal dislike for Jeffrey Dahmer due to his behavior in prison, his fun and humor. In an interview, Scarver clarified that the murder weapon was a metal rod and not a mop handle. Dahmer's body was kept in a refrigerator for about a year and was cremated in September 1995. Dahmer's father did not give permission to use his son's brain for scientific purposes. The ashes left after Dahmer's cremation were divided into 2 equal parts. One half went to Dahmer's mother, the other half went to his father and stepmother.
At the request of the relatives of Dahmer's 11 victims, his property was distributed among them. In 1996, lawyer Thomas Jacobson, who represented the victims, announced plans to hold an auction to sell items belonging to Dahmer, including a refrigerator and murder weapons. The estimated revenue was supposed to be $1 million. This news cow